So we keep on getting told to stop saying it's not all men. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the horrendous problem we have in our world today of domestic violence and abuse towards women. You probably have seen recently in the news and on social media platforms the fallout and the saga from the Better Bloke podcast.
Some people just lost their shit over a recent podcast clip where we encourage women to shut up. Let them talk. If you keep interrupting, you're not giving them the space they need to talk about stuff, and that's not going to help everyone. So I don't care what's in between your legs. Shut up and give people space to speak, and men do need that space more than women.
The Better Bloke podcast, fucking lucky. I'm busy with Married at First Sight. Thursday, they're done for.
But we're not going to have the discussion based on what you put on a different platform in its larger context. It's going to be how you manipulated a woman's response to make a comment that wasn't actually contextually accurate at all and just threw her under the bus.
We're living in a world where there's more equal opportunity between the genders as there ever has been, and blokes deserve exactly the same emotional care as everyone else. To say welcome to 2025, grow up, is exactly the same as saying man up, bury your feelings, don't talk about shit, and we don't care about you. We do care, boys. Keep talking. Your needs are valid.
It's caused a huge stir and a huge kerfuffle as people try to navigate why are we seeing an increase in domestic violence against women and abuse and everything that plays out thereafter. And one of the little subheadings or side-by-side parallel stories that always unfolds after this important story is put into focus is we have this other story running alongside it where women, particularly feminists, self-proclaimed feminists, are coming out and telling the rest of us to stop saying it's not all men. Now, what are they saying and why are we hearing this? We're hearing this for a few reasons. It's because every time there's a bad episode of domestic violence that makes the news and the public conversation or some form of abuse, naturally it gets a lot of attention, and it needs to. It's an awareness lifting thing. But in the aftermath, naturally there are men and even some women who come out and make the statement, it's not all men. Or, like I've said many times here on the channel, I've said that there are far more good men than there are bad men. But as I've been digging into this social media saga and this podcast drama that's been playing out in front of us all, I've been trying to find the answer to the question, why are so many people upset when other men say it's not all men? Let's unpack that for a moment, because the truth of the matter is, the factual reality is, it's not all men. In fact, it is a very small minority of men that behave in this way who ruin the reputation of all men because of what they do. But no matter how many times we hear this said, it doesn't seem to be enough to satisfy. And so I've been digging around and I think I might have found part of the complaint and part of the gripe around this statement. I will happily confess that I am someone who does come out in support of good men, but I also do the other side of that same coin, which is to denounce the behaviour of men who behave in this way. And I do call for personal responsibility and collective accountability. And I think I might have found part of the answer to why so many people get upset about the statement, it's not all men. Obviously, you have to be some kind of crazy lunatic to not be troubled by domestic violence against women and children and all forms of abuse that happen in relationships. For me, it's a no-brainer. It should never happen. I would never condone it. I would never do it. I'm a happily married man with children of my own, and I'm a huge advocate for men taking responsibility, treating their wives properly, treating their family and their children properly, and creating a safe place for people to grow up in. But we do have, as I said, this other storyline that seems to follow along with the domestic violence and the abuse situation. And what I seem to have uncovered, maybe, hopefully, somebody will correct me in the comments if they think I'm wrong. Maybe lots of people will. It seems to me that after the storyline of domestic violence or another story of mistreatment and intimidation and abuse of women makes the public headlines, it seems like the next story that comes into play is too many people, men and women, then simply saying it's not all men. Well, as I've said, that is a factual reality, but in response to what seems to be the cry of some women and some people telling us that simply saying it's not all men is not enough, we want people who will actually stand with us against this stuff. In that vein of thinking, that's why I'm making this episode. I'm here on the Andrew Gray podcast, a YouTube channel that is for empowering men to become good men. And I have no challenge whatsoever taking that position. And so I've got a few statements I'm going to make around this issue, particularly in response to this statement of you can't just keep saying it's not all men. I've got 6 statements that I want to make boldly, courageously, and with deep conviction because they are the truth of what I believe. Here we go. Statement number 1. There are many good men, and I am going to keep on speaking up for them. For those of you who are wondering and thinking, I thought you said you were going to stand with us against violence and abuse, where is that? I am going to do that. But for me, it starts off with we have to speak well of the good men that are out there. We will get to the other type in a moment, but I am going to continue speaking up for good men, speaking up for men who are doing the right thing and are living great family lives, looking after their wife and children. I'm going to keep on speaking for them. So statement number 1 is there are many good men. Number 2 statement is, of course, I condemn all forms of violence against women and children. I've said it all my life. I'm saying it now. I'll keep on saying it till the day I die. There is no situation that validates any man initiating any form of violence or abuse against women or children. Society is far worse for the increasing prevalence of this, and we've got to do more together to bring down these rates of abuse and violence. Statement number 3, we've got to return to original masculinity. Now, I'm defining original masculinity as protection, provision, and empowerment. What does that mean? Part of a man's job is to protect the world for people around him in his home, in his street, in his community, and broader afield if necessary. Men were put on the planet and designed in part to be protectors. Old school original masculinity encourages and trains a young man to become a protector. Secondly, it trains him to be a provider. What does that mean? It means being a responsible man. Sometimes I'm misread with this one and people think that I'm saying women should just stay at home and raise children. It's not even close to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is every man should have it in his heart that he needs to be a part of the provision solution. It's not satisfactory for a man to turn his back on his family, turn his back on his children's needs, even if he goes through separation and divorce with their mother. It's still his responsibility to try and be a good man in providing for his family. And then, of course, number 3, which is so crucial, empowerment. A man's job, my job, is to be an empowerer of others, because the alternative is a person who strips power away from people. One of the terrible things that we see happening in the context of violence and abuse of women and children is they have their power, their autonomy, their agency being stripped away from them or being controlled and restrained so that they don't have any personal power. Every human should be powerful, and it's up to old school masculine men to make sure they play their part in empowering others. This, of course, includes wives, mothers, children, the people around us that we are meant to protect and provide for. Statement number 4 is about responsibility and accountability. Here's what I believe. Every man who does initiate violence and abuse towards a woman needs to take personal responsibility. He needs to own it. He has committed a crime. He has created a sinful stain on his family and his loved ones. He must take personal responsibility. Collectively, we can hold that man and those men to account, to say to them, the standard you're living at is not acceptable. You must change. You have to grow. You have to get help. You've got to stop doing what you're doing. However, as a society, one of the things that we have to stop doing is we've got to stop punishing the whole for the crimes of a few. Now, some of you think this gets back to that other comment of it's not all men. That's not actually true. What I'm saying here is if we keep on trying to lambast all men for the crimes of a few men, we will be in the same situation that we all used to hate when we were in school, where the teacher would punish the whole classroom because 2 or 3 children were misbehaving. It's not fair, it's not just, and it shouldn't be the case in grown-up society either. We need men to take personal responsibility, change their ways, get help, and stop these actions of violence and abuse against women, and then collectively, our job is not to take responsibility collectively. Our job collectively is to hold people to account. That includes even our lawmakers, our legislators, those who preside over the judicial system. The same way it's true in a household when you're training young children. If you have a standard of behavior that they are supposed to meet, and they breach that standard, but you don't then follow through with a commensurate consequence, the child learns nothing. So part of personal responsibility and collective accountability is when these men are found guilty of violence and abuse, of course the consequence needs to be commensurate. I have no argument with that, but it's so important that we apply personal and collective. Statement number 5, we need to do more for sufferers of domestic violence. The fact that we can live in a country like Australia and we can see so many women trying to escape a violent situation who often end up living out of their own car with their children and a suitcase or two is a national disgrace. This should never be happening in a country like ours where we are so prosperous, so blessed. We all, including me, and I am including myself in this, we've got to do more with the education, with the resources, with the judicial system, with the support mechanisms. We must do more to bring down the incidence of domestic violence. And of course, when it happens, we've got to do more to support these women, often mothers, who are fleeing these horrendous situations. Statement number 6, we need more voices who've got enough backbone to speak up about role models and influences in our world. I'm very, very clear and deeply convicted about this statement. We do not need more voices and more personalities broadcasting messages along the lines of women are the possession of men and men should be allowed to do what they want with women. This is prehistoric thinking and is damaging to women and people and families and communities everywhere. We've got to do better in the media. We've got to do better in government. We've got to do better in peer group conversations down at the pub or at a cafe where we talk about the right role models, the right voices, the right messages who will do the right thing for training and speaking into our boys and our young men so that they grow up with a vision in their mind and their heart. I'm going to be a good man. I'm going to be a good husband, a good father, a good businessman, a good employer. I am going to live by a character framework. I'm going to live by some values that will make a positive difference in the world. We've got to do what we can to shut down and ignore these other voices that are sending our boys in the opposite direction. So these are my statements about this issue. I will never condone domestic violence and abuse of women and children. I stand staunchly against it. But when it comes to this phrase of saying it's not all men, I'm on both sides of the coin. I'm on the side that says it isn't all men, but I'm also on the other side of the coin that says let's stand for solutions. It's the two hand in hand. I'm putting myself out there publicly to say I am happy to go on any podcast, any YouTube channel, any show, any social media platform and be the guest of any of these other hosts and program runners who want to have an interview with someone who holds this view so that we can profile. There are men out there who stand against this kind of behavior and against these kinds of actions. So my name and my face is out there. I await people's invitation who want to have a conversation around this and any other programs that want to talk about what our men need to hear and what they need to be doing. There it is. I'm going to speak up for good men. I'm going to speak out against the behaviors of violent, abusive men, and I'm going to stand with women and people everywhere to protect them, provide for them, and empower them, and be that same role model who helps others to do the same.